It's still burning. The last video did pretty well, so I thought, you know what? If you just like looking at the different movies that are on that shelf back there, I actually have some other more massive collections that are a part of it. I try my best to collect on different directors and from different franchises, but I don't do that thing where I'm collecting everything from a certain studio, like Shout Factory or Kino. It just becomes too pricey, and a lot of the movies, I'm especially Shout Factory, I'm interested in a lot of them, but it's almost impossible. It's monetarily impossible to get everything that you want. But there's Criterion Collection, and a lot of those movies are pretty notable. Some of them are art films, some of them are harder to find foreign films, but a lot of them are pretty notable, considered some of the best movies to ever exist. And that's why I always try to go for those editions when purchasing certain movies. A lot of movies are only available on Criterion Collection, but there's some movies recently, more popular ones, that have been released by the studio that owns them, that have now given the rights to Criterion to do their own sets. And I like getting those sets because usually the special features are a lot better, and they usually come with a booklet that has some extra write-ups on it from film professors or historians. So to me, those are the best sets to get. So I thought, you can't see them, but I actually had them all right here. My stack of different Criterions that I wanted to talk about, of the ones I've collected. There's, at this point, I think there's well over 1,000 spines. So pretty much another series that it's impossible to get absolutely everything, but you could try. And I think there's a lot of these movies that are very, very good, very worth owning. And we're going alphabetical order, but backwards, because that's just how I took them off my shelf. Yojimbo. Dust on it. Yojimbo. This is the movie that was essentially ripped off by Fistful of Dollars. This is the Japanese directed film of Kurosawa's. It's a really good movie. I don't think it's as good as some of his other films, but it's definitely good, especially if you want to watch something right after Seven Samurai. This is like a good follow-up. It features the same actor. Some like it hot. I only watched this recently. This is the edition that I watched of it. Billy Wilder's what's considered the greatest comedy ever made. I think this is number 1 on AFI's top 100 comedies list, and it is funny. It still holds up today, surprisingly, because comedy can age badly, and some of these older comedies are funny, but it's a bit of a wittiness to it. It's the kind of humor where I'm not like falling over laughing. It's the kind of humor where I go, interesting. But this movie was like, it has both. There's wittiness, but there's also some flat-out funny moments. Slacker, this is Richard Linklater's feature film debut. This is a movie that it follows characters like a daisy chain. You meet one character, and then you follow the next one, and the next one, and it's just kind of going through the neighborhood of different characters, just experiencing a day in the life. Seven Samurai, Akira Kurosawa. This was the one I mentioned earlier. This is up there on IMDb's top 250 list, and it's probably the most watched foreign film, I would say. If it hits the list so high, I'd have to imagine people are actually watching it. And it is really good. People aren't lying about that. Like, this is a very good movie, and also was ripped off for the US with The Magnificent Seven. For Japan, a lot of their folklore characters are samurai, rohans, and such, but for America, it's cowboys and Indians. So I find that interesting that Akira Kurosawa he made these great movies, and then America would be like, let's do it too. And not that those movies are bad, they're not, but it's just interesting that a lot of it kind of comes from Japan, but then we give it American influence. Rebecca, now this is Alfred Hitchcock's film, and one of the only films of his that really got nominated for Academy Awards. He won the Academy Award for Best Picture, which, if you know anything about Hitchcock, his entire career, he never won a Best Director award. It's good, but it's not as good as his other stuff, and it just surprises me that this is the one that gets talked about as far as Oscars go, this is the one that got the most awards. So Punch Drunk Love, which up until Uncut Gems, this was probably considered Adam Sandler's best performance, his most serious performance. And Paul Thomas Anderson, as far as his movies, this is considered like almost the worst of them, which is kind of funny, just because he has such a good body of work. This movie doesn't have as fantastic of reviews compared to other movies. The Princess Bride, Rob Reiner for a while, man, he was like knocking it out of the park, movie after movie, and this was yet another one from his 80s streak. This is, of course, a good movie. I'm sure most people have seen it by now, but this is a really good set also, and I was just happy that they decided to make this set for the Princess Bride. We've talked about this on the podcast before, and how, you know, just watching the movie, it seems like an idea that should have been done by the time this movie had done it. In fact, it feels like an idea that's been done many times, and yet it's still just brand new, and it's what it's all about. Like, sometimes going back to the older stuff, it still works today and can be considered brand new, even though it's been done a billion times. Jackie Chan, and what's great about this set is that it's got both police stories in it, and I like that they gave it two spines in. It's 971 and 972. There's some other movies in here that they have extra movies on the set, and they don't consider it a different spine. Like, I have The Killing, and it also has the other Kubrick film, Killer's Kiss, which was made before it, as a bonus feature, but it doesn't get its own spine. And plus, I don't know if these have been released separately, but if you're gonna get the set, you might as well get both movies in one set. And Paths of Glory, this might be my favorite Stanley Kubrick film. I've been watching them again, and for years I really liked The Clockwork Orange, but after watching this again, I think this one it nails the story down a lot better, and it gets it done in a real quick runtime, which honestly I've come to appreciate a lot more shorter runtimes. Kirk Douglas, really fantastic actor. I've seen Spartacus now, and I'm going to try to see some of his other work, because these are probably his most popular films, and he's a really good actor. Kind of ahead of his time. Notorious, Alfred Hitchcock. This movie's great because it's got Claude Rains in it, and a lot of the tension is there. Like, this was probably very early on as far as Hitchcock goes, one of his biggest thrillers that he had done at the time, and would become a staple of his later movies. A lot of the influence that he did with his silent films and some of his earlier work like Saboteur, Shadow of a Doubt, Rebecca, this was the change where he then started doing movies like Rope, Rear Window, Vertigo, all these tension-building films. Night of the Living Dead, George Romero's independent feature that's public domain, so everybody can release it except Criterion will release the best version, and that's end of the story. Features a lot of good special features, and if you've never seen it, this is like the beginning of the modern horror genre. My Dinner with Andre, because some people can just make a movie where all they're doing is eating dinner and talking. And that's how you break Blu-rays, people. The Man Who Knew Too Much. This is a film that Hitchcock made and he would later remake. That's happened more than once with directors. Like Cecil B. DeMille, he filmed and made The Ten Commandments, and then years later he remade it. So as a filmmaker, I don't know if I'd ever want to go back and remake something, but I guess if you can make it better. I've heard people say, though, that this is the better of the two. So his remake, I guess, it's still good, but it's not as good as the original, from what I hear. The Lodger, this is probably the only way to access his earliest film. He has a lost film made before this, and then his first film ever, The Pleasure Garden, which doesn't have a release. For years, BFI has actually had a cleaned up version of it, and they've said, yes, we're going to release it on Blu-ray. You can even go on their YouTube page to watch the trailer for their BFI presentation that they did in 2012, and in the comments are like, there'll be a Blu-ray release, and there hasn't been an update since. So I don't know where that's at, but this is his third movie he ever made. I think they even say, his third feature film, because the one that's made between this and The Pleasure Garden, I believe, was called The Mountain Eagle, which is lost. But this a lot of people say that this was like the beginning of his career. They don't consider The Lost film because you can't watch it, but The Pleasure Garden, they say, isn't really as much a Hitchcock film as this is. The Lady Vanishes, which Hitchcock film, and this actually all came part of a Hitchcock set that had this, The Man Who Knew Too Much, 39 Steps, and there was one more, Foreign Correspondent. Yeah, okay, I had to go find... I bought these in the 4-pack, and I knew I was missing one, and I knew that the other movies, Lodger, Notorious, and Rebecca, all came out after, but okay, this is the other... I have every Hitchcock film that's been released by Criterion, so I must have passed by this one on the shelf. There's probably other ones I passed, too, because I feel like I'm missing something. I'm going through cataloging all my Blu-rays so I can better keep them in order. The Killing, which is Stanley Kubrick. One of his actually better movies, I think, too. If you watch Reservoir Dogs and then you watch The Killing, you're like, there's so much influence from that movie to this. I think Quentin Tarantino even said that this movie was a big influence on it. And this is just a classic heist movie, but just very well done. It happened one night, the most influential screwball comedy ever, which has basically led to every romantic comedy ever made. If you watch this movie, that's all this is. It's every single romantic comedy has everything it owes to this, because this one did it first. I Want to Hold Your Hand. This is Robert Zemeckis' film debut, and honestly, I thought it was actually pretty good. A lot of the stuff he would do in his later movies with characters being very well defined side characters, I mean, ones who aren't even part of the main cast, and you know, the revolving story of several people all in one event. Zemeckis was really good at that, and this really shows that from the beginning. The Guillermo del Toro set, which I actually recently complained about, saying that the set's a little ridiculous if you ask me, the way they fold it all together, which I still stand by, but it's just a good way to get all these Guillermo del Toro films together in one. Cronos, Devil's Backbone, which I think was actually a flop at the box office, and then because of that, he ended up making Blade 2, which was a big success, and then he was able to make other movies again because people were like, oh, I guess he is a good director. I guess Devil's Backbone was just a fluke, even though critically it wasn't. It was considered great. Then he made Pan's Labyrinth, which is considered one of the best movies, and then he went ignored for years, and then when he made The Shape of Water, they were finally like, we have to give him an award. We have to give him something. So The Great Dictator, which you can flip around, and there's Hitler. I think it's still effective today, even though at the time Hitler was seen a lot differently than what we see him as now, but still, otherwise, I think it's very effective. The Graduate, I don't know, what do I even say about this that hasn't been said? It's a great movie. Of course, they have that shot in it because that is like considered one of the best shots of all time, even though this isn't the correct angle. It's the one where it's like between her legs and the legs going over him, and that shows that she has the power over him, and that's like what every film professor ever tells in school, and they're like, that's filmmaking, that's how you tell the story visually. And I'm like, I know, can we use a different example? Please. Following Christopher Nolan's film debut that I don't think a lot of people realize exists. A lot of people go for Memento. Fantastic Mr. Fox by Wes Anderson, which this is one of like the only animated films that has been released by Criterion Collection. Watership Down is another one, but they don't really do animated films, which is kind of annoying, which is about a bigger topic in general about filmmakers kind of having a disdain for animation, this weird kind of neglect for animation. Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee, probably at his best. This was a movie that we actually watched in film class and had a great discussion on it, but I remember there was one guy who was really arguing about the ending, not liking it, and the class just was not with him at all, and people were actually getting a little annoyed because the class was running over the time. It was time to leave, but people kind of stuck around because they're like, how far will this guy go? Just dive into this hole. He's digging a deeper hole for himself because the professor was just not having it. And Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which, as you know, this is in Blu-ray packaging, which a lot of Criterion sets are not. They're like that, but this one came in this set. To this day, you can find this at pawn shops for really cheap because it is a really cheap set. When it came out, this was immediately released on Criterion Collection, and I'm not really sure why. and I'm not sure why they released it in Blu-ray packaging like this. I don't know if it was because this was one of the earliest ones, so they didn't try to make their own custom packaging yet. Carnival of Souls, I actually did a review of this on YouTube, so if you want to give that a watch, this is another public domain film. Feels like you're watching a nightmare, but not like a super dark, crazy, bloody, gory. No, it's not like that kind of movie, but it still feels like a nightmare just for the eeriness of it all. Breakfast Club. This is probably the most popular movie that's on Criterion Collection. I don't know why they chose this one to hit the collection compared to other movies. I know a lot of people would probably say this is John Hughes' best film, which it's good. It's really good. I probably like Ferris Bueller more, but I can see why they would put this one in there because a lot of the issues that are brought up in this movie are still existent today for teenagers, and one of the only movies that really speaks to them. So I can see why they would choose that one to be on Criterion. Brazil, which Terry Gilliam basically made a 1984 adaptation and has many different cuts. I think this movie has there's like 3 different cuts of this movie and it has them all, and I'm not entirely in love with this movie. I'd like to give it another watch before I really decide. Boyhood. So I remember this movie being announced years before it was released. I remember reading on Wikipedia that they were making a movie that was being filmed over the course of 12 years to watch a person age, and I thought that is the most interesting movie I've ever heard about. Has that ever been done, ever? And that was like in 2007, and then all these years went by. It finally came out in 2014, and that was actually the year I graduated. So the movie basically follows exactly the age path that I was. You know, it starts in like 2002 and it ends in 2014, and that was my entire high school life. The character in the movie is pretty much my same age, so I think that's probably why I didn't like it too much. The kid's really interesting at first, but then he becomes a bit of a gloomy, artsy emo by the end, which is fine, I mean, because it's about following the path of a character, but it didn't. By the end, the character is just not nearly as interesting as he was at the beginning, and also the actor ends up not being as good. Blowout, which extraordinary film. Brian De Palma really had it going on in the 80s, and this is seriously beyond words. Like, this is such a good movie. I can't even explain just how good it is, and John Travolta is amazing in it. John Lithgow is like a crazy villain in the movie. I knew there was going to be this hype around it, like, oh, I really hope I appreciate this film, but watching it, it was one that it got me right away. I understood it, I figured it out, and I love when a movie just can work with my brain the way that movie does. The Blob, just a movie that could have been considered a really cheesy 50s movie that just went forgotten with all those other kind of low-budget sci-fi movies of the time. But this movie stuck around because it just really knows how to pace its story well. It really takes advantage of the special effects and how to utilize them well. The story, for being a bit silly, it doesn't end up becoming so silly as fascinating and a bit creepy, but also kind of has a sense of humor about itself. The opening song is still stuck in my head all the time. Beware of the Blob. 39 Steps by Hitchcock, which I feel like this was another movie that was remade at one point, but I watched North by Northwest, and you're like, there's a lot of similarities here. Even that shot there, it's kind of similar. Which someone on Letterboxd, I don't know who wrote it, but someone said on Letterboxd that watching Hitchcock's earlier stuff is like watching the earlier, smaller versions of his later great movies. So it's kind of hard to go back and watch something when the remakes are way better, which in this case, 39 Steps, very similar to North by Northwest, and North by Northwest is just much better. 12 Angry Men, this is still up there on IMDb's top 250 list, and yeah, very good courtroom drama. A person's mind, a person's heart, and difficult decisions, and how we make those decisions, and where we put our morals. And there's a lot of that stuff that's brought up in the movie, but not brought up directly. It's just seen through all the eyes of the different characters, and how they are judging the person who's on trial, how they're going about making their decision. It's also one of those movies that take place entirely in one setting. And, movies, especially if you're an indie filmmaker, I think you should really try to utilize a way to make a movie in one set if possible, because that's going to be the way you can financially make it happen. That movie realistically probably cost the most just because of the actors themselves rather than the sets. But still, they found so many angles with it, so many ways to track the camera, to get the expressions, to have wider shots and close-ups. And then I had the Ingmar Bergman set, which actually is that big, and this has every single movie that he ever made. So I've been trying to get through some of these. I've started with some of the more popular ones like Seventh Seal, Persona, which is on the box art here, and Wild Strawberries. Kind of was like the Hitchcock of Sweden, where he would just go about so many different types of genres. It always has this melancholy, dreamlike atmosphere to it all. Like every one of his movies just feels like a fantasy, even though sometimes they're not fantasy movies or even in fantasy settings. Pretty much the complete opposite of Bergman, I guess, would be Godzilla, which the first movie at the time was, a bit of it was like an anti-war film in a way, because it was mostly about a warning of using all these atomic bombs and the capabilities that humans now have to destroy one another and the consequences of that. So the monster symbolizes all the consequences of something like the bomb. But then they took that and they turned it into a character itself, and none of the movies have really taken that same theme into the other movies. All the other ones are now just about monsters, and the monster, I think, is always meant to symbolize something else, but never really the atomic bomb nature of the first movie. But what's great about this set is it has all the movies from 1954 to 75, which before this set had come out, it was pretty hard to find a lot of the earlier films on Blu-ray or even DVD. Some of the later stuff has been released by Sony, and then like the new movies are by Warner Brothers, or there's pretty much a way to get all the other movies on Blu-ray. But this set was like finally a way to get all the early movies, one set. So if you're a Godzilla fan, this really is worth it, because this is going to be the best way you can pretty much watch every movie. And if there's any other directors or sets or franchises that you want to see me look at in my collection, I have every Steven Spielberg film, maybe I'll do those. Leave a comment, like the video, subscribe if you want, I would love that, and use the bell icon. I've been using that bell icon a lot more often for people I subscribe to, because videos just go over my head now, and that shouldn't be happening. What happened to... If you're subscribed, it's on the main page. Should be right there, right away. Not recommending me a video from 3 years ago of a dog, which the dog videos are good, but I want to see the stuff I'm subscribed to, right? So the bell icon has been a lifesaver. It's pretty ridiculous that YouTube got to that point. But thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks to all my Patreon supporters. For only $7, you can get your own monthly movie review. Ask me to review anything I haven't already. There's also other perks like blogs, exclusive videos, and early access. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thanks so much for watching this video.